Welcome to the Intentional Leader Podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. We appreciate you listening in and learning with us. The stories and leadership tips you hear will help you become a great leader. Listen intentionally. Now, to our host, Sean Olson.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast. This is the podcast where you hear the stories of real people just like you who have become extraordinary leaders. You'll learn valuable tips from their lives, tips you can apply to your own life to become the best leader you were created to be. When we are intentional in our leadership, lives are changed. I'm your host, Sean Olson. I'm a business owner, author, and speaker, and I'm glad to have you here today. If you would, please hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening or watching, and hit that like button to help all of our algorithms. We appreciate you being a part of the podcast. Today, I'm excited to have our guest. Her name is Stevie Johns. Stevie is the founder of Inkwell MGMT Incorporated, and she has been on an incredible personal and professional journey, but her journey is about impacting people. So I'm excited to have Stevie here with us today. Stevie, welcome to the Intentional Leader Podcast.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. Good to have you here. And you're coming in from the beautiful state of Florida. And listeners, Stevie and I met actually about a month ago through a common platform, other common friends, through a program with Kim Walsh-Phillips and Justin Greeny is how we met. And so it's nice to have us get to this point and sharing together. So Stevie, we've talked about the podcast and I've heard a little bit about your story, which is really engaging. And I love your passion and purpose to impact people because that is what leadership is all about. So give us kind of a little walk through your professional journey and leadership lessons learned along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my professional journey in college as a psychology major. Thought I was going in to be a guidance counselor. Again, just the purpose of wanting to serve others and help, specifically around youth. I found myself quickly in a space of recognizing that, education was such an important part of that journey, and got a awesome opportunity to work in virtual education, which back in 2004 was not the hype, right? It was new to the world, and I quickly found myself with an opportunity to serve the chief executive officer as a executive office manager. And so I transitioned into that role, learned a lot about myself in the interim, and quickly, rose to the top with her and was with her for about 15 years as her chief of staff.
Yeah. I want to stop really quick. What is the biggest leadership lesson you learned from her?
Great question. I honestly, and it's something I still practice today, listening. And she always was extremely intentioned. She always said, listen also spells the word silent. And being a female leader, I think there was a lot of opportunities of question in that time frame. And especially in a world of, proving that virtual education truly can work. So she was open to listening.
That's awesome. Cool. We'll continue on with the story.
Yeah. So after being with her for 15 years, I transitioned into finding a place. I still wanted to be in an executive chief of staff role, but I wanted to gain some experience outside of education. And I went to work for a marketing association in New York City as a chief of staff for a male CEO. So I really was from one extreme to the other, learned a lot about myself in that time, learned a lot about, who I wanted to be, and personally and professionally, and found myself in a space about 2 years in where I truly wanted to dig my heels into helping individuals and organizations become the best versions of themselves. So that is when I started my consultancy, very small. It was called Stevie Johns and Co. And I served and partnered with, all walks of individuals wanting to, maybe they were in a transition in their career, or they were really just wanting to make a greater impact in their current role and the things that they were involved in. And also organizations, working with different department leaders on how they can best serve their teams. Are their teams the right fit for what they're wanting, them to accomplish, et cetera. So that was a great broad stroke of dipping my toes into working individually and organizationally with change.
Yeah, what I love about that, you're 2 years there in that other chief of staff role in New York City and then get into your own organization. What I like is reading between the lines of everything you're saying. You're constantly observing and watching and trying to take it in. And I think it's one of the biggest mistakes people make is they go to work every day and they do the job instead of taking it all in. And, I love the phrase that when you're in college, you're paying to learn. When you have a job, you're getting paid to learn. But we have to have that mindset. So has that growth mindset always been something that's in you? Is it something that you had to kind of adapt and create as you were going through? Where'd that come from?
Yeah, I've always been a learner in that I was always wanting to be better. I was, learning lessons daily and putting those lessons into work. And I never had huge career dreams growing up. It was kind of, I came from a single family home. It was me, my mom, and my twin sister. And I really took the full opportunity to understand the assignment. Like, I can be better. I can do things differently. I can be my own person. I can make an impact. And obviously, to do all of those things, you have to be open-minded and learn.
Yeah, I love that though, because you weren't afraid of doing that either.
Yeah, it's always interesting, when you maximize the time that you have in a day and you are truly being intentional about the things that you could do better. Not that you did something wrong, but, ask yourself the question, challenge yourself, like, what could I have done better? I think having that as your tool, daily as you walk through having conversations, interacting with your teams, with your family, with your friends, I've just always, taken advantage of that and used it as an opportunity.
Good. So what came then of that? What was your next steps?
Yeah, so about 6 or 7 years into my consultancy, I received a phone call from a good friend who is on the speaking circuit. Mm-hmm. And he asked if I could help him with a coaching program. And so I quickly, jumped in. It was about a 6-week project. And the fun thing when you have work for yourself, I guess, is that you can pick and choose where you want to spend your time and who you spend it with. And so I quickly recognized that this was really cool work. I could make an impact. And he asked what it would take for me to run his business.
Wow.
And so that was kind of my introduction into the actual speaking world. Of course, I had served, other entrepreneurs and authors and coaches in my consultancy, but not at this level. And so I learned so much in those, it was almost 5 years I was with him. I learned so much about myself, again, about the industry, and truly what impact looks like. I always had a vision of what it meant to make a difference. But when you're impacting thousands of people at a time in the work that you're doing, there's pressure, but there's also a lot of excitement and fulfillment.
Yeah, definitely. So that brought you to Inkwell.
Yeah, so Inkwell is just a love of really all of my professional experience brought into the same bucket. After really thinking about how I can continue to do the work that I did with that speaker to the masses, I decided that I wanted to have my own agency and represent speakers that could continue to make the impact. We're at, different levels of their career, and we're potentially working on different projects that would, allow for them to maximize what I could actually bring to the table in serving them. And so I opened Inkwell on my birthday, June 4th of 2024 this year. And I did it with so much intention with starting small. I really wanted to build it, from the foundation up. I wanted to make sure that I was being picky with how things were operating. I did this solely by myself and quickly learned that I need others, along the journey with me. So I started out with 3 speakers. We did our official launch the end of August, and we had 12. And at the end of this year, 2024, we will have 18 speakers.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. So let's dive into this for a little bit. A lot of our listeners are solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, as well as just professionals, officers of organizations who have either thought about speaking or are trying to get into speaking. And so I want to start asking you kind of like the backside of it, meaning all those event organizers who are looking for speakers. What is that? What are those unknowns for us who want to get into speaking of like event organizers? Yes, yes, yes to this. No, no, no to this. Where are their heads when they're looking for someone?
Yeah, I think the sourcing of speakers is actually, it's becoming a little bit, I think, cumbersome to find the right talent to ensure that individual that they're looking for can actually make the impact on their audience and curate a unique experience that would serve them, in a greater way. I think right now the industry is, I say this with love, but the industry is saturated with speakers, mainly because from a professional standpoint, a lot of, professionals speak regularly, in rooms to other leaders, or they're part of, the leagues and the Rotaries, et cetera. And I think that there's a transition in what that means versus what being a speaker on the circuit could mean, which makes it overwhelming for meeting planners to identify what direction to go, right? And there's so much great talent out there. There's a lot of people that have put a lot of backing into research and making a stance to be credible in that specific niche. And so literally, I think the meeting planners are in a position where they're sourcing from a huge pool of wonderful talent, and it's overwhelming. And so part of my, dream with Inkwell was really to create a unique and diverse roster from fee level all the way to niche and level of expertise, to make it easier to provide that unique curated experience and be able to say, yes, I have the right person for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when I hear that, I'm just kind of curious about this. I know there are other speaker agencies, I'll say it from that context, like Inkwell. Are event organizers getting to a point where they're like, to minimize their potential risk, they want to go with an agency where they trust that agency and they trust the talent that's inside of there versus, in my sense, just say, in this context, I'm not with an agency, so I'm a free agent that's out there. There's more risk because there's not somebody standing behind me. Is that where a lot of event organizers are going?
I would say it's twofold. I think that anything that we can do as bureaus or agents to make the planning process and selection process easier is obviously a huge benefit. I think that it behooves a speaker to collaborate or partner with an agency and or a bureau to have that advocation, to have that that one sole individual or organization to serve them at a level so that they are getting the consistent customer service and the experience that they're receiving is seamless. I do think there is a lot of hesitation around that because speakers could naturally be concerned about committing to, an agency or a bureau. But I always say this is a relationship business, and I look at it like a pure partnership. Yeah. I want to be able to serve. I believe in you, et cetera. But if you're not there and you want to have the diversity as a speaker of who can reach out and who you might have the opportunity to partner with from the client perspective, by all means. I mean, I think that there's always a space in a speaker's journey to realize I might not have the capacity right now to level up. And so now is the time to partner with an agency or a bureau to do so.
Yeah, good. I love that. Hey, Intentional Leader podcast listeners, thank you for tuning in. The intentional leader is a true thing that we really believe at Re-Energize Professional Coaching. And so we want to invite you to join us for the Intentional Leader Academy. The Intentional Leader Academy is a 6-month leadership development program. It is an open cohort, meaning people from multiple companies come in. It is hosted in the greater Columbus, Ohio area. We have people that fly in from all around the United States for this. We would encourage you to check it out for your leadership. This is not Leadership 101 at the Academy. This is like the graduate level leadership. You've been at it for a few years. You've had a few promotions. You have higher aspirations. So from those frontline managers all the way through VPs, we have them attending the Intentional Leader Academy. Check out the QR code attached here or go to renergize.com/academy. We'd love to have you be a part of the Intentional Leader Academy. So let's talk for a second about if our listeners were wanting to either pitch themselves to those events or to somebody like you at Inkwell Management and stuff. What are kind of those have-to-haves that would grasp your attention to say, hey, I could add them to my roster?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of things. Great question. I always share with speakers that I'm, forming a relationship with, vetting, et cetera, that they really need to be confident about their messaging, right? And so having a true understanding about what it is that they're wanting to deliver on stage, not just from, a passion perspective, like, they're passionate about this topic, but also they have a backing from like a research study or a book, right? And then also, what are those tangible key takeaways that's going to set you aside from another option of a speaker that is in that same, niche market or niche expertise topic level, as an example. So I think that is a good start, understanding like who you want to be, what does that brand look like? And then as you transition to like the tangible assets of marketing yourself, being marketable, those things will all come into play, right? You have your video assets, your, the other resources that provide that credibility to be a thought leader in that space. You have a process in place for, building those relationships, marketing yourself, and booking. So I think it's a long journey. There is a lot of research out there right now about the speaking business as a whole and what it truly takes to be a successful, like full-time speaker. And there is a little bit of a misconception around, I can start speaking tomorrow and make $15,000 a gig, and exactly. I'm delivering impact. And there's a runway to get there for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as I'm listening to you, another thought kind of came into my mind. When you think about events, conferences, things like that, there are keynotes and then there's also a lot of breakouts and such. And in the circle of people that I've talked to, some are like a part of the National Speakers Association, other avenues. There's this kind of just an argument or a conflict around, I can do all of it, right? My message, whatever it is good for a keynote, it's good for a breakout, things like that. What's your sense around that? Are they different beasts? I know we can have the content. Do we need to frame it differently? How's that play?
Yeah. I think it's a huge benefit to be flexible in what you provide. So if I am a keynote speaker speaking on burnout and a client reaches out and is really interested, but they're really looking for like a 2 to 4 hour session, of course, I'm going to try to meet their needs and deliver on that. I have the content, I have the means to put together some, work bookable conversation and activities around that conversation. I think that at some point, though, as a speaker, you have to decide, am I a keynote speaker or am I a facilitator? Because what happens is it really takes, I would say, two different brains almost to deliver at an optimum level. And speaking of burnout, and that was pure coincidence that was my example, but I do feel like it could become, a question internally where you're questioning whether or not you can continue down the path of delivering and being flexible. But I think there is time. You obviously in the beginning want to build out the relationship aspect and show that you're flexible and nimble and that you can deliver. So I would say that you can do both, but there will come a point if you're marketing yourself and partnering with the right individuals that you'll have to make a decision of which direction to go.
Yeah, I like that you were talking about like the two different hats or two different minds on it, right? Because I really think it is. So like in my sense, I facilitate workshops all the time. And I'm very comfortable with it. I'm comfortable in front of the crowd. I'm comfortable with the facilitation. I do breakouts on a regular basis. I want to get into that keynote realm. And I don't feel like I feel like I have the tools to do it, but I don't know how to get it there because it is a different beast. And maybe I'm overthinking it at times, but I do think delivering that 30, 40-minute keynote that's driving people to action and helping them understand that premise of what we're trying to do is totally different than facilitating a workshop. And so I like how you're talking about the two different brains on that. If you could really quick, Stevie, like just articulate very quickly the difference in the approach of a breakout / workshop versus a keynote. Like what's the mindset difference for those?
As a speaker planning for a keynote, that's obviously their comfort zone, right? And what they do. A lot of times they have their foundational key topics and they customize accordingly for audience, themes, deliverables, etc. That I think for a keynote speaker is like the sweet spot. They want to be able to, show that they're an expert in that area, but tie it into that organization in such a way that it resonates deeply with the audience. The workshop piece and to facilitate, I think takes a full mental planning stage of this is my foundational topic, which could very well be a keynote topic. So they could be at a level of comfort for providing that facilitation, but there's a lot more involved at that level because you might only have an audience of 15 or 20 or 50 maybe even, right? And so I think that the level of preparation, you have more individual captivated audience members that are going to be engaged in conversation and they're going to want to converse at a higher level than obviously you would experience on a keynote stage. So I do think it takes a little bit more mental space in preparation for what that, facilitation looks like. But I do think it's a great way for a keynote speaker, especially early on, to generate that credibility, get footage, testimonials, because it is more of an intimate experience and setting.
Yeah, definitely. No, I like that. So you just hit on something there at the very end of your comments about testimonials, video footage, reels, things like that, sizzle reel, whatever it may be. Are those like have to haves if you're really wanting to get into this?
As a keynote speaker, yes, there are definitely, I would say, 4 key things that you have to have in order to be marketable and bookable. And those 4 things I'm speaking of are tangible. So obviously your demo reel, which starting out could really be at any level. I always tell people you want to have an opportunity to show evolution as a speaker. So that first demo reel that you have isn't going to be Mac Daddy, right? And it's not intended to be. But if you're a $5,000 speaker, it's expected that that might be the case, right? On the client side. So the speaker reel. The other 3 things I would say are also video based. And these are what really the bureaus or bigger clients would lean on. And we at Cicospace, which I'll share more about Cicospace in a few, we call them signature story videos. And so those 3 videos really captivate who you are at the essence, not as a speaker, but who you are, what is your story, basically building up that credibility. It also, the second video is almost a commercial on your offerings. You know, a lot of speakers that are starting out might be a coach or might own, be an entrepreneur and own a successful business. So that opportunity to film that content and provide that to a bureau or a meeting planner really shows who you are at the foundation, why you're credible, and why they should book you on their stage. And then the third signature story video is top keynote topics that you might, those are the topics that you're getting booked for. So even if you have 3 topics on your website, one of them is the most popular. Let's take an opportunity to create an asset around the why behind that topic and the impact that you make, because that's truly what's going to be the piece that sets them aside from potentially another option. And so those are the 4 video assets that I would say, regardless of fee level, that you should have starting out and invest in those pieces. Again, It doesn't have to be a huge enhanced production, but It would be great to have that from a marketing perspective, showing your credibility and what you can bring to the stage.
Yeah, I love that. And what I like about that especially is I think a lot of people think if I was to jump into an agency like Inkwell or something, that everything's done for you. No, that's not the case. You still got to do your job to put those things together and drive it. So Great thing. So quickly, let's jump over to Cicospace. You mentioned that. I know that's another company that you work with. What is Cicospace? What's your role with them? And how does that tie in with Inkwell?
Yeah, so Cicospace is the premier content company for keynote speakers. So if you think about all of the production pieces behind a speaker at any level, Cicospace delivers on that. We partnered, Cicospace and myself, with Inkwell in a really cool way to better serve the community, right? So why does that make sense and why did it happen? Really crazy how the connection even came into play. But what I'll say is, you in the industry, it's a small world, like anything else probably, but and you want to partner and fill your space with people that are truly making an impact and are seen as experts in the industry. And so it was truly a partnership of, I can help Cicospace do all of these things and bring a different level of experience to better serve the speakers that Cicospace is filming or, creating speaker reels for. So a lot of it naturally made sense. I serve as their fractional chief of staff, and I have really helped them build a foundational process to scaling. The keynote industry is growing crazily. And so knowing that and setting ourselves up for success, what do we have to have in place in order to meet those needs? And so I've been on a journey with them for several months of making that happen. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of awesome speakers who are just starting out and trying to, set them up for success, but then also speakers that have been on the circuit for years. And that's really, really cool.
Fun. So I want to jump back to you for a minute as a leader. That phrase chief of staff has come up numerous times in different roles. So when I think about Stevie the leader, not your technical knowledge and expertise, but just from a leadership basis, who is Stevie the leader? Like what's your leadership brand that sets you apart?
Yeah, I have a very interesting approach on personal success. So I always tell people I have two brains. I have the tactical side. I can, knock out any sort of administrative aspect needed. But then I also have the strategy side, which really complements the tactical side, especially for a growing business. So when I think about Stevie the leader, I think about the unique ability to have a vision for anticipation of what's needed, what's next, and how we're going to get there. And I've had that mindset when I first, started at Florida Virtual School back in 2004. And I think it has served me in so many ways.
Yeah, that's a unique gift. And what I like about that for all leaders, listeners included here, we have to find our unique gift, right? It's important to look at other leaders and see what do we like and not like from leaders, emulate the good, avoid the bad, but you still got to find out who you are as a leader and that unique giftedness and special sauce. So I like yours around that realm of critical thinking and strategic thinking and looking ahead and trying to drive things. So that's awesome. That's awesome. So one last question about the industry as I was thinking about this. What is the biggest mistake speakers make when they're trying to really get rolling in the industry?
It's a great question. I think, and I might not say that it's the biggest mistake, but I think I'm a realistic person and I like to share realistic expectations with my speakers on my roster or even speakers that I'm working with in other capacities, that we have to be realistic. We have to look at the relationship between those that are, putting your contracts together, the clients that are calling, and the speaker that's delivering, to truly partner and trust that, things will happen in due time. And I think that's really the hardest part to wrap your head around, because especially people in professional roles that have been speaking, in a variety of capacities over the years, they are automatically under the impression that they've done it, in corporate settings for all these years. And now they know that they can do it and make an impact in a living, on the circuit. And I really think that the setting of expectations, being realistic about what that looks like, and making it so that it comes in such a way that naturally, like you're not showing desperation. It's a natural evolution. It really is. And it could take 18 months, to get your first full desirable paid gig, and so I would definitely say being realistic with expectations, and also not feeling the threat of the industry, if you will, and that really comes into play with your strategy or your personal brand, is there might be a lot of people that speak about burnout, but what are you going to do so that that's not a threat or they're not competition, right? And so again, being marketable and really leaning into what your personal brand is, I think is key.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, what I hear behind all this, and you used the word a lot early on when you were talking, but it is being intentional, right? Nothing happens by chance. Nothing miraculously takes place because we make a decision. We have to be intentional and put in the work and drive for it and realize, the phrase I use all the time, I put a spiritual context to it, but I'm like, any goal that doesn't take the power of God to accomplish isn't a worthy goal. From a human perspective, any goal that we put out there, if we don't have to work hard to get there, it's not actually a goal. And so it takes that work, takes that time, and being intentional with it. So
absolutely.
Great insights. Well, Stevie, we finish every episode with the same question because we like quick, applicable tips. Stevie, what is something our listeners can intentionally do today to be a better leader?
So I'm going to bring it back home and finish how I started. I would say embrace the practice of listening.
Simple and powerful. Appreciate that. Well, Stevie, it's been great to have you on the Intentional Leader podcast. Listeners, check out the show notes for how you can reach out to her and link up to her in different ways. Good luck with Inkwell. You're in that first year still, and I know it's growing rapidly. We're excited to see what happens there, and especially that partnership with Cicospace. And thanks for being here, and pray you have an awesome week.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. Be sure to see the show notes for links to Reenergize Professional Coaching and links to contact our guests. Now, hit that subscribe button so that you are alerted with every new episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast.